the work that I do, while covered under a somatic umbrella, is called Spacial Dynamics.
Okay.
And really we look at how movement and the way we inhabit space affects the emotional as well as the physical, mental, and spiritual well-being of a person.
Okay.
Yeah, well, the name I chose, Levity Therapeutics. Levity is a force. We're all very familiar with gravity as a force. It's measurable. It's seen every time we drop something.
Okay.
In the morning when we get up a little sleepy and we feel a little extra gravity, or we feel the gravity of a situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that pulls us down.
Yeah.
Well, counter to that force in a universe where there's polarity in all things is levity. And levity as a force is an upbearing force, one that starts below and lifts up. And that force is not so much measurable by scientific instrument, but is really an empirical experience of the individual. We see it in children, even as they skip with their arms above their hands.
Right.
And that feeling of levity is often associated with joy, happiness, and just upfulness. That feeling of being supported by what's around us and what's within us to give us an uplifting feeling.
Okay.
So Levity Therapeutics was what I chose as the name of my business.
Powerful name. Is levity almost kind of like that counterforce then to gravity too?
It is.
Okay.
It is the counterforce to gravity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And like I said, we live in a cosmos of polarity, light and dark, warm
Right.
and cold.
Right.
And so gravity also has a polarity, which is levity, which most people really don't have a mental grasp of, but have a soul emotional experience of. Yeah, so the umbrella is called ISMETA, the International Movement Education.
ISMETA.
International Somatic Movement Education Therapy Association.
Okay.
And they cover other somatic disciplines like mind-body centering, Feldenkrais, Alexander technique. And so the somatic nervous system is a nervous system that deals with skeletal muscular movement.
Okay.
How we move through space. My discipline is in Spacial Dynamics, which is a discipline created by a man named Jamin McMillan.
Okay.
He was born in Detroit.
Okay.
Did much of his study in Europe, at least his postgraduate study. He's a physiotherapist, but was also a very renowned fencer. And Spacial Dynamics developed out of an experience of his where when he fenced, he could extend his own personal space out beyond his foil and therefore arrive at his target before he had moved and then just slip into that space. And so he took that experience and brought it into education and physiotherapy. And so our primary theories are you have a body, a space that you inhabit for a time. Some of us inhabit more certain sections of that space more than others. Yeah. Some people like to exclusively in the library. Some people like to stay in the kitchen all the time. So we look at the experience of movement through space and how it can affect our internal condition, our health and well-being, as well as how we connect with the outside world, where we meet it, how we meet it. And we use a large variety of techniques and experiences to really give the individual an experience of space that is new to them, try and introduce them to new parts of themselves, but their personal space is very much their own. It is them.
Right.
And that space can be inhabited in ways that can have a positive or negative repercussion on our experience of the world. The role, well, I guess it is the experience of people that we are trying to change.
Okay.
Really, Spacial Dynamics is about change, the individual changing to experience the world in a way where trauma is not the filter that one experiences the world through. Trauma it's not the filter that one experiences the world through. Trauma is really, it's an event or a series of events that happens to us.
Right.
It is done to us.
Right.
However, it can create a gesture, a way of experiencing the world that we then extrapolate our own experience into the world through the trauma alone, and it becomes a blinder, really. It becomes a force that moves through the individual into the world. And, we see it, with the cycles of violence in the poor communities, whether domestic, sexual abuse of any kind. And that model is formed, that gesture is formed and passed on through the generations, and becomes how a group of people experience the world. So in spatial dynamics, we try and teach, can we relate to an ideal? Can we relate to a way of being that is productive, creative, and really leads to an experience of love in the world? So often therapies that deal with trauma focus on the trauma, define the trauma, whereas we prefer to begin with what is ideal. Can we make a change in space that will lead to an experience where we no longer bring that which is negative and behind us, the past, into the future? While we would never want to blame a victim often repeats unto themselves what has been done to them. So it becomes like a hammer over and over again of sculpting the personality through trauma. And what we're saying is, really, you were born in perfection. Can we relate to that perfection and begin to bring about change through that lens of experience? And we do a lot of that through gestural posture work, and also slow movement exercises, as well as hands-on work.
So, just to be clear, because it sounds like you're talking about body language as one thing, how you're carrying yourself, how you're acting out kind of what's going on internally, or what you've been instilled with, or how you've been nurtured. All these behaviors, they come out in how you hold yourself and your facial expressions and your reactions, right? But we're also talking about that, the word I best use, like that tension, or that code that's in us that's there. It just keeps repeating itself. It's a broken record, or it's not whole. So this is kind of what you're talking about, or you can expound on it more.
Yeah. In terms of body language, we all have inner experience of others and body language, and we might not react in an intellectual way to it, but there will certainly be some sort of reaction within us to how someone else holds themselves. Oftentimes we'll see, those who have suffered domestic abuse are greatly retracted from the world. They're pulled back. They have one toe in, and then they wonder why their hip hurts. Why does my back hurt? Why is it that the world seems so close and so offensive? And can we just make a slight change in how we hold ourselves so that the world is where it's happening, outside of ourselves? It's not so close. Can we overcome a trauma through gesture? This is a complementary therapy, something that's meant to embellish and intensify or strengthen people's experiences of their own cultural healing, of their own choices within healing modalities. But what we're saying is, can you begin with the body and the space around the body? Can you begin there to give yourself a platform to get to the starting line with an even keel? And sure, tension, we all feel tension, right? They call it the human race, which ends up in a rat race so many times, right? And so that causes tension and stress, and we live in a society that really the people's psychological and emotional health is impacted every day through the media and perceptions of the overlords, really, right? And people that are stressed have a hard time unifying. People that are stressed are in a fight or flight mentality. They're always just trying to survive.
Absolutely.
So the creativity, the unity, the productivity suffers because of that.
Right.
And so can we hold ourselves in a way where we stay in the eye of the storm, where that which is, intense and unpleasant stays where it's happening and doesn't penetrate into the inner chambers of a human being,
right.
Which is really a private place,
yeah.
a place of it should be a place of solace. But what we're saying is maybe start on the outside and get that reflection on the inside. If our experience is always one of tension outside, and then we retract into a meditative state, there's a good chance that outer experience is going to be reflected and become an added challenge to finding solace. So can we make a change outside? Can we move and find a way to make a change? The physical is a representation of the spatial energetic life body.
Okay.
So that which plays out in the physical is a direct mirror of what's happening spatially.
Okay.
Can I see it? Yeah. What is that? I don't consider myself a healer so much as a mechanic.
Okay.
All right? And only because I don't want to put myself in a position of power over others. Are there healing aspects to the work? Yes. I really consider myself a spatial mechanic. I look at what is practical. What can we change that we can bring into the world? Really, the responsibility of a good therapist is to not see things through a lens of pleasing or displeasing.
Okay.
It's just what is.
Okay.
This is how it is in this present moment. It shouldn't matter if it makes me feel good or bad. If I'm doing my job correctly, I am simply seeing it presently how it is. And so from that vantage point, I can be much more objective and be able to serve as a mirror to someone who's looking to change.
Right.
And really, my job is to empower someone to be able to make that change on their own. It's not me doing to you, it's me offering an invitation into a way that you can explore and experience in your own way. Right. Depression, which is really rampant in our society, is the inability of one to exert their will into the world. Inability of one to exert their will into the world, to bring that gift, that spark that makes them unique and a gift to the world. How do they bring it into the world? It's an over association with gravity. It's heaviness, yeah. It's the loss of the get up and go. Can we find a motion that supports us and leads us towards the force of levity, an upbearing force, something that will bring us to a better upright inheritance? We've been given this inheritance of being upright, but most people are rounded, whether by their work or by the constant pounding of emotional surrounds.
Right. Or even just technology.
Or technology, exactly. All these are pulling us down. I mean, death is really gravity is one, right?
Yes.
And so, can we use motion to bring a greater strength to our will forces that we will then bring them into the world? There's obviously a lot of different causes for depression. There's chemical imbalances as well that can lead to depression.
Right.
From my standpoint, can we use the body and the space around it in a way to realign with a balance of forces of gravity and levity. In spatial dynamics, we do a lot of moving in the planes or with the planes.
Okay.
So we live in 3 dimensions. Yeah?
Right.
And to get 3 dimensions, you need 3 planes. You have a horizontal planes.
Okay.
Yeah? You have sagittal planes, that which cut things down the middle.
Okay.
And you have a frontal plane. The frontal plane is what is most associated with the will forces. And so we'll just use exercises that give an experience of an eternal plane, like a wall that we bring with us into the world of our will. And where those 3 planes meet, there's a point. And from that point, 3 dimensions occur.
Okay.
Everything builds around that. And how people wear that point greatly experiences their experience of the world. Really affects their experience of the world.
Beautiful. Wow. Okay.
Well, I would say anything that's harmful is violent, but
Okay.
I think I understand what you're saying is, can someone drain you with something that might be presented as friendly?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, a hug is a pretty good example.
Okay.
Someone who clings, is looking for something because they're unsupported in themselves. You know, I think women especially suffer this
Okay.
in our culture.
Yes.
With uninvited touch.
Okay.
What I have found in my own experience and with those I've worked with is when one has learned to fill out their personal space and to inhabit it fully, it is much less likely that that space will be invaded by that which is not invited.
Right.
This is our kingdom. This is our garden in here. We should be the ones who choose who we open the gate to. And if that gate is present and strong, people of weak moral fiber will not be drawn. So one of the things about trauma is we get dented spatially. Okay? And so those dents have almost a vacuumous quality for people of weak moral fiber.
Interesting.
And so again, we're not saying it's the victim's fault, but there is a condition that leads to repetition.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, touch can be disguised as all kinds of things. What we're really looking for is even exchange.
Yes.
As much give as there is take.
Yes.
So that is it's a challenge. People are lonely.
Yes.
People are looking for others to give them what they think they need. And so it actually does that person a service to be whole and full. And while it might seem cold to keep someone at arm's length, it might actually be doing them a favor because we're giving them a representation of who they are as well. And so what they say, love your enemy as you would love yourself, right? So how can we bring that challenge into how we move through the world, how we hold ourselves, and how we hold others to accept their own inheritance and their right to be upright and true.
Yeah. It kind of paints a picture for me when you are talking about both the equal exchange or the even exchange and, kind of almost protecting or almost, blessing your not your enemy, but someone who's kind of energetically imbalanced. I think of, I don't know if you've seen the movie Celestine Prophecy.
Oh, I read the book.
Okay, read the book. I haven't read the book, but I have seen the movie. And in the movie, and I'm sure they talk about this in the book, there was a scene where the main character, he meets a woman who's a part of this Celestine Prophecy group in South America, and she's kind of aware of his energy, but he's not aware of his energy. And his energy was like, he thought he was just being friendly, You know, he's coming in and hi, you know, talking to this woman and giving a smile, but she's just like, you know, kind of, you know, and because she feels that his energy is kind of overpowering. You know, it's very extremely over assertive, you know, and it almost is. It shows that it's almost like pulling from her, like it's almost like her energy was like growing smaller and smaller, and his is bigger and bigger, and so she's, you know, she gets up and eventually walks away from him without interacting.
Yeah.
And then there was another scene to paint when he kind of begun to see this energy and recognize it in himself. There was a scene where there was him and a young girl. They were talking. So now a young girl who's, you know, women are not that they're weak, but you know, there's a small girl, you know, over a large man. The dynamic is a lot different, and but the energy was just an exchange of love, and you saw it from them, and he was happy, and they were just sitting, you know, comfortably with one another, and it was just they were both on like an equal plane or an equal level, you know. So that kind of illustrates to me what you're talking about, but like where you can feel it. Even sometimes like yeah, this person's really overexcited, but like, you know, being happy, but you know, it's taking too much from me to like interact with you,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I think we've all had that experience of there's the person that walks through the door and you feel them the second they enter a room. It's like they bump into you, or there's, you know, the person that stood behind you for 45 minutes and you didn't notice they were there at all.
Right.
And so with spatial dynamics, we're saying if you create a boundary, then that can be met, and that creates a point of interaction, a place in between, you know,
Okay.
which is really an even ground. You know,
Like a mutual ground.
mutual
Right.
ground, a
Right.
common ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're familiar with this term. I feel like you probably are, but just to give an explanation to maybe some who aren't familiar with the term cognitive dissonance, right? So basically, it's justifying our bad behaviors, ways that, you know, we feel uncomfortable, like smoking a cigarette. You know, we smoked a cigarette, we like it. You know, we need it to cope when we're stressed. You know, but we know when we read the box, it says causes cancer, causes death. You know, we know that birth defects, you know, etc. But we still do it, right? And so there's this cognitive dissonance that's in place where we need to justify, oh, but, you know, I need it because, you know, or I'm going to die one day, or, you know, whatever the justification is. What's your opinion, you know, through spatial dynamics about cognitive dissonance?
Well, I think on an even greater scale, we're seeing that hugely in our socio-political worlds here.
Absolutely.
Where people are basically justifying their fears and hatred. How I would see that and define that is an isolation or trapping oneself in the head, living only in the realm of justification and previous experience.
Okay.
We really consider the mind to not be the brain, but to be the entirety of the sense organs that are around us, the entirety of the body. When someone lives only in their head, that's where the loop of past experience and past experience through the filter of the personality dwells. And so if someone only lives there, is only in the library, can't get to the hearth, can't get to the basement, can't get into the exploratory limbs in a true experience, then they're going to be stuck in that pattern of repetition, of creating their own inner dialogue out of what is really falsehood.
Right.
Because it is only through their own eyes.
Right. That they're seeing this. It's not reality.
It's not reality.
Right.
And so it's not reality.
Right.
And so can we learn to inhabit the entirety of ourselves, and will that break the chain? Will that break the loop that is causing one to again extrapolate their experience of the present moment and project it into the future, what is really behind them? It might have absolutely nothing to do with the true state of reality. Absolutely. And in fact, I would say that this work is more potent as a group exercise than as an individual practice. Once an individual has reached a certain mastery, then the private personal practice can be just as powerful. In the beginning, nothing can be richer than to see in another and have reflected back a change that gives someone a fresh experience of the world, that clears their eyes, so to speak.
Yes.
So much of what I do is done in a group setting.
Okay.
I host classes at a couple different institutions with varying topics. But really, that's where needs to happen. This is a social movement.
Okay.
How we hold space, what we bring out into the world, is going to shape our own experience, but also others' experience of us, and maybe even give them a glimpse of themselves.
Yes.
And that's really the hope, is can we move through these processes with anyone in the commonality of humanity, body, space, and in that commonality give each other a true experience of the other. Even listening to someone is not happening. I mean, the mechanics are inside my ear, but I got to reach out to you to hear you.
Yeah.
Right? And so, in a society of opinion and rhetoric, listening is becoming a lost skill, because, again, the technology, everything has been condensed into, this is my experience, this is my opinion, this is how it is. Whereas maybe if I just go, well, I'll meet this person halfway for a moment and listen openly, then there can be a change within me, and then society changes.
Right.
And that's really the even keel that I think is much more important to develop rather than the protest. Protest is, you have an activity of inequity here, and then you have a protest here, which is a pole pulling on each other. But what happens in the middle?
Right. Right.
Because really, 9/10 of the people that are involved in the inequity are just sucked into a space that's been created by previous generations.
Yeah.
It's a lens that's been given to them, and so can we give people tools to just see others, to really see. As we've touched on previously, one's experience of life then extrapolates into their actions in life. And so if we give people an experience of themselves and give them an opportunity to really refine and enhance their perceptions, there should be a change on the emotional soul level that will not allow them to continue the cycle of abuse. And it's very, very common, right? Most abusers were abused.
Right.
And so, as the therapist, as an organization, all we can really do is offer an invitation.
Okay.
This is the valley of free choice, the valley of decision.
Right.
The planet of free will.
Right.
And so we offer opportunity to people. If they choose and come in with that free will, they're much more likely to change. Whereas something like being incarcerated or forced into a situation, you're much less likely to see change, although it can happen.
Right.
So really, what do Christians say? Hate the sin, love the sinner, right? Which is hard, right? It's really hard. And so can we, as individuals who have chosen to strive towards wholeness, give that opportunity to others that have taken too much? Basic coping mechanisms. We want to learn to know our habits. We want to learn to see how we're holding ourselves when an emotion is present.
Okay.
All right. It could be anything from clenched fists. You know, what happens when I unclench those fists and try and pour out of my hands rather than retracting in? I mean, what happens? You clench your fist, it moves up your arm into your shoulders, into your neck, and the next thing you know, you're jacked up in your head and you're blowing your top, right?
Yeah.
You're in the red.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And so can we create motions that bring that all down? Can we learn to identify and know our habits? You know, like a general wants to know his enemy well.
Right.
You know, we don't want to think of ourselves as an enemy, so to speak, but these habits that don't lead to an ideal experience of life are that. They're disrupting our right to happiness and to experiencing the world as it is. So that's a good place to start, to just know thyself. You know, when I feel this, what is my body doing?
Right.
If I just do that first with my body, does my emotion change? If I change how I'm holding myself, if I'm changing the motion, does the emotion follow?
Right.
You know, I mean, it's in the language. You know, that person's well grounded. He's got 2 feet on the ground. You know, it's this downward association of coming down from the head out into the limbs where we create and interact.
Right.
When everything pulls up towards the head, there's isolation and less control of the emotions.
Right.
In terms of conscious rituals, I think that a person's experience of their cultural life is important to them, and that they should build that. And if they truly can say to themselves, I feel better after I do this, that's enough for me. All right? I think that it can be easy to latch on to an anciency that was created for a period of time and might not be totally relative to this time.
Okay.
Not that we shouldn't honor the past, but I think that we, particularly as Americans, need to find a commonality that's born out of true spiritual experience.
Okay.
A new culture, born out of what these times need.
Right.
You know? But I would never encourage or I would never discourage someone to give up anything that makes them feel truly good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think most people have unconscious rituals that don't often lead to the same thing, you know, and religion is often, you know, obviously comes with its whole bundle of struggles.
Yeah.
You know, anything where power is exerted over another. You know, we live in a cosmos where not everything that the eyes see is all there is.
Right.
So do we choose as individuals to interact with what's unseen?
Yeah.
Can not be supported? I think so. I think it absolutely can. You know, it's again, like I said previously, trauma becomes a learned behavior that's repeated.
Right.
And so, I mean, the first thing is that a person needs to recognize that things are not okay, right? And then that they want to change. You know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Right.
So it absolutely can help. You know, the Spacial Dynamics has been involved in something called the Hands in Peace, which is an Olympiad event.
Okay.
So the traditional Greek Olympics were 5 sports: javelin, discus, ring wrestling, long jump, and foot race.
Okay.
Where you pass the baton.
Relay. Oh, marathon, yeah.
A relay.
Right.
And so Spacial Dynamics, through the Hands in Peace organization, has brought 5th graders from all around the world, particularly from interfighting groups, together to train together in a spirit of cooperation and then compete on a level field.
Okay.
So that's one way. I mean, it's the youth, the younger generation that are really going to have the easiest time changing because they have the clarity of youth, they have the hunger for experience and for joy. I think it can also help the older generations. I think it needs to be taken slowly and sensitively. But it really takes an individual. Can we lead an individual through experience where they're going to want to change?
Right.
And really, the greater experience social syndromes are rooted in individuals. So can we get a change here, a change here, a change here, until you reach that tipping point, that mass consensus, 100th monkey, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Until the big change happens. So yeah, I think it absolutely can be a part of that. The cultural aspects of change are really only relevant to the individual, in my opinion. It's really going to be the internal and spatial work changes that lead to effect. In the 70s, when you had a huge, rebirth of Afrocentrism and this peace and love culture that supposedly flooded in, but it was really, in some ways, materialistic, right? It's the head wrap, it's the necklace, it's whatever, until the point where now, you used to have to seek that stuff out. Now it's like you go to the mall, right? You put your money down, you buy into look like any culture you want. But the internal culture is the spiritual culture. That change is what's really going to bring about. It's not going to be about your sneakers, right?
Absolutely.
I don't include it in my session unless it's something as simple as digestive, not severe problems. I myself am a huge believer in the use of herbs.
Okay.
I personally have used Western herbology for most of my adult life.
Okay.
I rarely get ill. I don't know how to say it, but I'm a huge believer in the leaves and roots, right?
Yes.
It's a powerful gift of this earth, and I haven't taken an antibiotic in probably 20 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I feel blessed with my health, and I do things to maintain it. I think it's really what people have to get out of the mindset of is get to the emergency and then deal with it. It's like what is the daily tonic?
Yeah.
What is that which keeps everything running at a high level? But my hat is totally off to anyone that forges forward with that as a profession and to bring that into the world. I think is amazing. Yoga, I think, can be really effective. It just depends how it's done.
Right.
I think that it's been infiltrated with a large amount of materialism, egotism. And so I think when choosing a teacher, you have to have a really strong awareness of what you're looking for and what is being offered.
Yeah.
If it's just about your body, then it's just going to be about your body. So it's, yoga is one of those things that has become something other than its root.
Right.
As it's moved through the cultures, and particularly into America, where it's huge. And a lot of my laborer friends have found great rejuvenation through it. But I also have a lot of yoga teachers that come to me because they're bent out of shape, because they've been doing things in a very purely physical manner.
Right.
And so if we can learn to be held in space by the forces of space, the energetic life body, not be focused in on the body, then yoga can be a great practice. What Spacial Dynamics looks to avoid is any motion that's finished or held.
Oh, I see.
Because it can be like a death, right?
Okay.
If something's done.
Yeah.
I mean, when I watch people do yoga, they're trying really hard, and it's really muscular and stuff, but it literally, to my eyes, looks dead because it is so held and so into the body. It's not raying out. It's not looking for little changes, little microscopic movements, So that the spirit of unfinishedness or unbornness, even that which is continually unfolding, should be sought out in any practice like that, in my opinion.
I like that kind of comparison of yoga and asana to somatic therapy and spatial dynamics, in the essence that when you do asana, you're supposed to be aware of your breath, right? And that, at least that's what I've learned in my own training and my schooling, in my own practice through Ananda Marga, has been that you need to be aware of your breath when you're doing certain asanas. You also need to be aware of your food. You also need to be aware of all the more subtle things that are going on with your body, because when you do certain asanas, some might, be universally beneficial, but some can be harmful. Especially if you're not thinking about your breath, if you're not thinking about that constriction, even that you're not open up and doing things in the fluid, whereas you're just, very coarse and strict and held. Whereas I see in the spatial dynamics conversation that, that it's all about your awareness. It can't come from anywhere else but your awareness. Whereas yoga, you can easily kind of manipulate it, and has been easily manipulated, where we're just looking at the physical. But with spatial dynamics, you have to come from an internal place. It can't be anything else but that. Or at least, the beginning, where it comes from, right?
Well, we would really actually be starting way outside.
Oh, okay. Excuse me.
But looking for the reflection inside of, am I feeling that even keel? Do I have a true sense of peace? Has an inner condition arisen through extending out into space and being supported and held by space in a way that's new to me? When there's a physiological detriment through things like drug use, that's going to be more difficult. When there's been an actual physical change to the anatomy and physiology of the body that's disrupted it, it's going to be an added challenge. What we're saying is that any trauma is going to have a spatial repercussion, and that you can begin to shift what's happening inside by repairing the relationship with part of ourselves that is invisible, that is outside of ourselves. What we're saying is that any trauma is going to have a spatial repercussion, and that you can begin to shift what's happening inside by repairing the relationship with part of ourselves that is invisible, that is outside of ourselves. The dents that I was talking about.
Right.
It's like you get a dent in the side of a car and use a plunger and pull it out. What is that dent? Or what is that retraction? You spoke of like a bone replacement. So you're taking something, a space that was someone else's, and bringing it into your internal space. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
So you're trying to integrate something that's foreign into your own personal space.
Right.
Or if there's a trauma, that a lot of time in the limb, people will pull back from inhabiting that limb. So can we begin to move in a way that creates a wholeness, integrates that into the entirety of a person's experience of themselves to overcome the injury and trauma?
Okay. And what about?
Well, I work with a sliding scale of $75 to $100 per session. Sessions are usually about an hour and 15 minutes. We do charge $125 for an initial session if there's a chronic issue.
The consultation.
The consultation aspect.
Okay.
Because I usually use about 90 minutes to 2 hours for those sessions.
Okay.
That being said, I do a lot of work trade, and I try and work to where people are at. I don't want to turn people away, but it's good for the person receiving to also give something as well. And I need to survive, but I always try and find a way to work work trade, but I limit how much I'll take.
Sure.
Just to kind of protect myself a little bit. In terms of how many sessions, it just, entirely depends on what a person's going through. There's usually some sort of change right from the start.
Okay.
Whether it's just a feeling of lightness or an intensification through awareness, because a lot of times someone is completely withdrawn from an area, and so they kind of have to move through that to get to the next step. But usually, once they go through that, then there's a release, and there's a change begins to occur. I've had a lot of success with people that are struggling with traditional physical therapists in terms of progression. Some success with chronic pain. Again, it just really depends on what the person has experienced and how much they're willing to take on. Because I'm going to put my hands on you. I'm going to, make some changes through hands-on body work.
Okay.
But the most important thing is, can we re-educate the individual to move in a new way that supports them where the illness or the injury or the trauma no longer exists. Well, insurance is a tough one, right? It's like, if you're wealthy, you get the golden parachute, and a lot of times these services are covered. I personally, Spacial Dynamics is not covered in the United States, whereas in Europe it is.
Okay.
In some countries. I think developing a relationship and showing a willingness to work is a huge thing for me personally. If someone comes, they just want to lie on the table, they don't want to take up the work, I'm going to be much less likely to want to offer free services. Through my own personal philosophy of life, I try to give away a certain amount of work to how much I charge for. And I ask people that can afford to pay at the top of the scale to pay there, so that we can support those who can't necessarily pay anything. But I'm happy with a pot of soup. It's just a matter of, I really feel it's important to offer something, whatever it is. There are organizations that are beginning to offer things to the poor. Like I was talking a little bit about the CCRT, the Community Center for Resilience After Trauma, which offers free courses to the community and these types of things. I think there needs to be more of that. It takes individuals being willing to write grants to create organizations that will support individuals such as myself, who have families to support, have services to offer, but are not supported by the larger system, which is really a criminal organization and not much more in terms of insurance. Right. So what I would say is ask. Meet, create a relationship, and then I feel that an equality or an equity will come out of that willingness to meet.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Hunter. And for someone who wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
The best way would be through my website, levitytherapeutics.com, levitytherapeutics@gmail.com.
Okay.
I'll get right back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Coming up next, Hunter did some awesome demonstrations for us, dealing with the different planes, the emotional elements regarding those planes, and how we can begin to work through them. So you can definitely try some of these exercises out. Definitely contact him or do some research further if you're interested to learn more about them. And also, how to develop your awareness of these parts of your body, these traumas, these tensions further. Definitely contact him at Levity Therapeutics. And, look for the next coming interviews. I'm not quite sure yet who I'm going to have on the platform, but I'm out searching, thinking of the next topics. If anybody has a suggestion, please contact me. And thank you so much for being a part of my journey, which is your journey in improving the diaspora. Give thanks. Bless.
This is an exercise, a Spacial Dynamics exercise called the pulsar. it's an exercise to experience the frontal plane. We were talking about depression earlier, and this is a very good exercise for overcoming depression by moving out and into the frontal plane. Taking a sphere of the self, expanding out, and bringing our will into the life of the limbs. So here we have an exercise that deals with the sagittal or the midline plane. This is a spatial dynamics exercise called the tides. This one we're just reaching out into the wide world and bringing it into focus. The sagittal plane is the plane of the intellect. And the mind that is scattered can be overcome by working with the sagittal plane. This is a spatial dynamic exercise known as the tree, and is a playing with oppositional forces and also giving freedom and autonomy to the head. This is a spatial dynamic exercise known as, it's actually a Boatmer gymnastics exercise, that is designed to give one an experience of the horizontal planes, the plane of the emotional life. Very good exercise for clearing away negative aspects of the emotional life, being supported by the plane.